In his current business, which is called Simple Creative Marketing, Anf and his team help their clients, usually small businesses and freelancers, to leverage the great customer experiences that they create to generate more leads and sales. And so, without further ado, Anf, welcome and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Oliver. Glad to be here. Yeah, it's really interesting how a relationship that was developed many years ago, can come back during a pandemic, and you're like, hey, let's have a chat, and this is how we
Yeah,
arrived today.
that's it. And obviously, hasten to add that recently, Anfernee also became a rounded customer as well. So whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. But again, it's always great to have Anfernee on board. So obviously, giving you a little bit of an introduction. Maybe is there anything that you'd like to say at this point to set the scene around case studies? There's the usual angst and sometimes lack of confidence of when many businesses come to marketing, promoting themselves, and this all sort of falls under that umbrella. So maybe you can give us some idea of why you've chosen case studies as a really great conduit for building a business, and what are your principles and philosophies around it?
Yeah, that's a great question, Oliver. And I think the best place to start really is on a very strategic level in terms of small business marketing and the experience that I've been through over the last decade, really working with small businesses and startups and freelancers, and really understanding the common challenges that a lot of small businesses are facing right now. And one of those are, typically what I'm hearing today is, this whole content treadmill idea of having to produce a ton of content all the time, trying to stay fresh for Google, but also trying to get in front of the right people who might be interested in your product or service. And then, if you're a freelancer and you're a solo entrepreneur and you're that one person doing everything, you'll tap out very quickly. Like, I don't have all the time and energy and resources to do what, it's easy to look at someone like a Gary Vee out there, and he's producing daily content. Every 5 minutes there's something new coming out from that guy. But then you have to realize he literally has a team of like 30 staff, who's an engine behind it building that thing. And so, we don't need to be the Gary Vees of the world to do that. And I had a really interesting conversation with my graphic designer recently, where she basically said to me, she said, Anf, you know how everyone is like pushing that social media thing, and we need to be putting content all over social media. She said, I've never had one client come from social media. I don't even post on social media. All my clients come through just referrals and me doing good work and building relationship through communities that I'm a part of. And so I just want to start today's conversation by saying, we will talk about case studies, and we'll talk about the power of social proof in demonstrating what you can deliver to potential prospects and clients. At the same time, this is only one strategy that's available to you, and there's many others, and you really have to work out for your business what's resonant with your values, but also with what your clients are looking for.
Awesome. Well, maybe we can start there. I've picked up on a phrase that you used that is social proof. Maybe just for for anybody that may not sort of quite understand what that is, can you give us a definition of what social proof is and how it works, and why that's important for any business?
Absolutely, and I'll use just a common example that we all deal with. Let's talk about a movie. Okay, the last Avengers came out a couple of years ago now, but the next one's coming soon. And all it took for me to go watch that movie was a mate of mine saying, "Hey man, go check out this movie. It's awesome, special effects. XYZ actors in it." And that to me was enough proof for me to go and pay the money, to go watch the movie, all right? And this is very common. If someone says, go to this you're looking for, I've got my 4-year wedding anniversary coming up, right? And I just reached out to some of my mates and said, hey, what are some suggestions that you guys have, to make that a special occasion for me? Restaurants, places to go, these sort of things. And I'm really looking for people who I know are also married, people who've been through to some, great experiences, for them to recommend certain products or services or places to me. And that's social proof, right? So you can think of a time where you said to someone, hey, check this out. If we're in a business context, maybe you said to someone, I've just hired this amazing writer or this amazing strategist or coach, or I'm using this now, this amazing accounting software. You should check it out too, because I think you might use that, right? That's social proof. When someone that you trust is saying to you, go and try out this thing, right? So you can use that to your advantage when you're recommending, or when people are searching for a solution to a problem, and you happen to have a good solution, right? So you could say, well, they're coming to my website, they're coming to my social media, or finding me in whatever way they're finding me. All right. Now, what I want to present at that moment while they're in consideration phase, right, is some evidence, by way of testimonials or case studies, right? So with people who've worked with me and my business, having them say, look, this has been my experience, right? And the key to this is that you're not looking, yes, we want to have the positive testimonial, right? But it's also, we want the more realistic testimonial, right? So I'm okay with someone saying, I worked with Ant, he did some copywriting for me, 9 out of 10, right? I don't need it to be 10 out of 10. Okay, what I want it to be is real, right? So that's the key to a compelling social proof.
And I think the other thing worth noting around this is, especially from a business point of view, with social proof, and social proof just isn't case studies. It's everybody's probably really familiar with, yes, I can ask for a recommendation, but I have a look at the reviews on the App Store. I can do a Google search and have a look at an article that compares one product with another. And what that means is that even before you are ready to purchase or even interact directly with the company that you are considering, your decision is 90% made based on the social proof that is there on the internet, right?
Absolutely. And there's a common question that I use when I jump on a call, the initial conversation with a prospective client. And I learned this from one of my coaches, and I typically ask, why me and why now? And usually what the answer is because I've already done the research, right? Because I've already seen you on 20 podcasts that I believe in, and I've seen you talk to Oliver, and I've seen these things, or I've seen evidence of your portfolio, right? I'm speaking to the designers here who are listening, and the people who are doing that kind of work, where you've got a portfolio available online somewhere, or maybe I've got an artist friend who literally has his portfolio like a fold-out book type thing, and he walks into hospitals that he does work with, and he basically says, look at my portfolio, would you like me to do some artwork for your building? And then that's when the decision is made, right? So another common social proof, I did a post on my Facebook yesterday about, or on Sunday when I was visiting a cafe, and I said, if I was promoting a local cafe, what I would be doing as the cafe owner, or whoever's in charge of the marketing for that cafe, I'd be asking as many customers that are coming through the door, and definitely the regulars, right? Video in their face, ask for their permission, of course, and just saying, hey, can you just give me like 2 sentences of why you keep coming back here? What do you like about my cafe, all right? And then they'll tell their story. Why do you come here? And that's what you want people to see, right? So I actually advocate, instead of telling people what you can do, show them what you can do. And by showing, what that means is asking the people who've purchased from you what results they've been able to achieve from your solution.
Excellent. Well, I think we'll deep dive into sort of the specifics of case studies in a bit. Just wanting to say to everybody listening, of course, as normal, we're quite happy to take questions. If you're in the Zoom room, pop them in chat or in the Q&A module. If you're out there in Facebook land, watching on Facebook Live, again, put them in the Facebook feed. We're monitoring that too, so we're delighted to take your questions. Also interested for any comments from the audiences around social proof. Are there any sort of specific data points or specific things you look for as a business owner or as an individual when you look to make a purchase, or look to go to a restaurant, purchase a bit of software or whatever it is? Quite keen to understand from the audience what bits of social proof resonate with you the most. So please feel free to put that, and we'll certainly bring that up. So, as you mentioned at the beginning, case studies. There's a million different ways to market yourself. Case studies being just one of them, because you can not only talk about why you're good, you can demonstrate and actually have another voice there. So again, maybe I'm interested in 2 things. So first of all, what's the power, and I think we talk about sort of authentic, that's a word that's often used in marketing a lot and can sometimes mean a lot, can sometimes be just one of those fluff words that people throw in, right? So I'm kind of interested in why is a customer voice more authentic than anything else, if used correctly. And then maybe we can jump into sort of maybe the anatomy of a customer case study and explore that a bit more. But yeah, why is a customer voice so authentic and powerful?
Now, yeah, it's a great question, Oliver. And I'm going to I'm cognizant that we're speaking to an Australian audience, and so yeah, mainly, and so for Aussies we have what we call the BS detector, and it's on high, right?
Yeah.
So whenever we get someone out on the street and they're spruiking and they're going, yeah, I'm the best, mate, I'm the best, right? We immediately our BS detector goes up to 10 or 20, and we go, okay, prove it. Right, so and we don't like that. Now, in the American context, it's a bit different, right? So if you're dealing with American clients and you're over there and you're trying to, do a business over there, it's actually quite different. The personalities and the way they promote is quite different. It's okay to actually step up on a stool and say, I'm really great at what I do. Here in Australia, we are dealing with something called tall poppy syndrome, and we have this inherent it's almost we don't promote ourselves enough, which is why we struggle for a lot of freelancers and solo entrepreneurs. We actually struggle to do the promotion thing, right? It's actually, I would say, the challenge we have over here is we don't do it enough, right? But back to the question, like I would say, it's something that I learned from there's a guy called Glenn Carlson he's got a company called Dent, and something he said to me years ago, which still is on my mind, is make your clients the stars of your show, make the clients the stars of your business, right? Because what does that mean? It means that you have to produce and deliver the goods, as the supplier or as the service provider, right? If you do not generate results and outcomes and deliverables for your clients and they don't get what they purchased, right, then it's very hard for you to go out there and ask them to share their stories, because they're not going to. They're going to say, look, I hired this Anf guy and he wasn't able to deliver, right? And that's a story you probably don't want people to go around telling, right? So it actually, it's like a balance check, and then it forces us as the provider or the freelancer to actually do the work to produce repeatable results, right? And to actually have a methodology, to have a framework. And I'm going to talk through the framework with you in a moment for how we produce case studies for our clients. And it's really designed and modeled off 10 years of copywriting experience that I've been doing since I was working at Hub, right? So it's and even before that. But it's really about, it's not enough. Yes, we have to have that belief within ourselves that we're in confidence that we can deliver great work, and that's you wouldn't start a business if you didn't have that, right? That's a starting point. The second part is now we want the evidence, right? And the prospective clients and the prospective partners want the evidence too, right? So I do a lot of partnership conversations like you do, Oliver. So when we're talking to partners, typically, how do we start the conversation? It's like, well, what are our values? How do we align, right? Who are our audiences? Do we match, right? And then we go into, okay, well, what results have you been able to produce? And I don't see a partnership conversation too different to a client supplier conversation, because you're actually looking for the similar type things, right? You're looking for, do they have results? Can they prove it? Do they have a system? Do they have a methodology, right? And do they have, can they add value to my business? And those sort of checkpoints, we're always evaluating against those. So I hope I answered the question. I know it's a bit of a long answer.
Yeah, no, I think you have, and I think the way that maybe I would sum that up is to say that a good case study is almost like a mirror, right? It allows your prospective customer to understand what it might be like to work with you, to hear from somebody that they may empathize with and align with, and they can visualize. Okay, well, I can see, Anf has helped somebody that's like me, therefore maybe there's a good chance he can help me too in the same way. Before we jump into the framework, I guess for everybody out there in the audience who is likely to be, a freelancer and a solo business owner without a marketing department, without huge budgets, without big teams, there are sort of like, maybe there's that sort of, how would I ever do this? How am I ever going to create something, that is going to be compelling? Do you have any views on the format of case studies? I'm sure you could have it in many different types of formats. Is there, some more easier or more appropriate for some kind of people than other, or somewhere that, you would, just to make a start?
Yeah, I actually had this conversation last week with one of my clients. So we did a case study for her. When we produce the case study, we actually do it as a Google Doc, so then that way we can collaborate. And then I basically say, look, put that on a page on your website, and then and create a section for customer success, or a section for case studies, whatever you want to call it, and then have a series of those case studies listed there. And this is something that we did for Hub as well. When we started this process, what we wanted to do, Hub being a co-working community, for those who aren't familiar with it, what we did was basically had a page for customer or member stories, and then we basically produced a series of member interviews that we put on the site, and then turned those into articles. So the format was written article with images. I've also seen this produced in as something as simple as a visual image. So for the designers in the audience, create it as an image that you can put on social media, or you can put it on a banner, you can, whatever way you want to do it. I've also seen case studies really effectively used in email marketing. So I've seen someone literally take what would be the article, but actually put it into an email, and send that to their email list. And then another one I'm doing at the moment is actually a proposal. So I've actually got the case study embedded in my proposal software, and I'm about to send that to a prospective client. And as part of the proposal, the pricing and what the services are, one of the pages is, here's a client just like you, or a business that's just like yours, and this is what we were able to achieve with that particular client.
Awesome. And the reason I asked that question, again, just for the benefit of the audience, is just to perhaps make it clear that, when you think case study, a lot of the time, maybe you're thinking video and high production values and really sort of, expansive type of things, but it doesn't need to be that way. And one of the reasons that, I wanted Anf on the show is just to be able to demonstrate that even as a solo business owner, as a freelancer, this is something that you can use as part of your marketing repertoire. So, Anf, I'm going to give you the floor in a sec, because I know you've got some examples. But again, just to say, guys, on Facebook and in the Zoom room, please feel free to put any questions through, either here or in the Q&A module or in the chat box. We will relay them. Really interested to be able to hear your thoughts. Have any of you had experiences with trying to create case studies? Do any of you have case studies at the moment that are being particularly effective? We'd love to be able to chat about some real life examples if any of you are doing this at the moment. So Anf, you're now going to take us through the anatomy of a case study, and maybe give us some examples as well. Show us some of the work that you've done.
Yep. So just before we do that, I'd love to hear from, I know there are a bunch of people on live with us right now. If you want to just share in the comments or the chat, if you're in there and you can do it, what type of business you have, because I think that could then help us, work with you. I'd love this to be interactive, in some way, and we can actually work with you to develop a case study if that's something of interest to you. All right. So let's go into the framework. Also, Oliver, you mentioned video. Now, for those of us who like doing videos or doing Facebook Lives or live streams like we're doing right now, this is another great way to do a case study, right? You imagine, instead of Oliver's actually got me, and I am actually a random client, right, on this call, this is a nice way to do a case study, right? So we could literally talk about, if we weren't talking about case studies, but we were actually talking about my experience using the software, then that could be a live case study that can then be repurposed to YouTube. It can be used in different ways as well, right? Another way we've done case studies for one of our clients is through podcasts. We actually lined up the interviews with their clients, and we gave them the questions, and they interviewed their clients on Zoom, and then we took that audio and put it onto their podcast, and we added an intro and an ending, and then that became the podcast episode. So here it was, just literally just sharing, this is how we helped XYZ business achieve this result, and that's a nice way to do a case study as well. Okay. All right, let's get into the framework. I can see people starting to interact now. That's awesome. Now, I'm not looking at the comments, so Oliver, if you, I think you're checking.
Yeah, I've got them.
Let's go to share screen. And what you should be seeing now is my framework. Can you confirm that? Yes, I think we've got it. All right, so this is essentially the framework that we've developed to go from a concept of what we want to, the story we wanted to share, to then here are the actual steps we need to go through and present, right? So for those of you who are familiar with copywriting, you always start off with the punchy headline, right? So when you visualize this now as an article sitting on a website, right, or an email, right, in an inbox, which means the subject has to be compelling, right? If we, we're getting bombarded with hundreds of emails a day, and well, no, I am, and so, for me to open up the email, the subject has to be compelling, right? It's got to speak to me and make me want to click open. Same with if it's sitting on your website or on your blog or on social media, right? That headline's got to really deliver a punch, right? And so the key to that working is to actually have a metric associated with that. Okay, and I'm going to show you an example in a moment of a real case study that we did for a client. And the one thing we really focus on is what's the actual result that we want to present. Right, and even before we jump into the 7 Ps, I'd like to actually go back one step and say, I'm assuming that you already know who your buyer avatar is or your customer persona is, right? You've already done the work to understand, okay, this is who we sell our product or our service to, right? So I'd start with that. I'd start with bring that out, right? Whether it's in a document or just off the top of your head, right? Think about, okay, well, who's the buyer that I'm trying to reach here, and then what is the pain point that they typically have that we can help solve, okay? Because this plays into what the headline is, right? If you know what the outcome is that they want, then your headline should really speak to that outcome in some way, okay? Is this making sense so far? I just wanted to check.
Yeah, it is to me. Guys, if there are any comments or questions, in fact, we do have one, Anf, and I'll relay that in a second. It's come from the Facebook live feed. But guys, if there's anything about this that you want to dive more deeply into or get Anf to explain in more detail, now's the time to ask. Yep. So, in fact, though, Melissa has asked a question, but it's about proposed next step. It's about sort of 7. Shall I leave that for a bit until we kind of get to that? So Melissa, if you're listening, we will definitely get to that question, but we'll just wait until Amp's gone through the process and then we'll ask it.
Yeah. So we got the headline. We make sure it's got some kind of metric associated to that. And where I see this fail is when the metric isn't clear, right? So if your headline is Margaret, hired us and we changed her life. Right, like if that's the headline, it's too wishy-washy. It's too broad. I don't know how did you change the life, like what happened, right? But if you said that we were able to give Margaret back her Sundays to spend time with her kids, right? Now that's life-changing. Okay, if we were able to, our software helped, remove 10 hours of bookkeeping work every month for this client. Perfect, right? So we know exactly what the outcome was. Then we move to the 2, which is profiling the customer, and this is where you literally, this is where you highlight your client. Remember what I said earlier? You are making your client the star of your show, right? So here's where you give them their 5 seconds of 2 paragraphs of fame, and you basically say, this is the client, this is the type of business they are, or who they are, a bit of a profile, and give people an insight into not only the company, but also the individual, right? So if they're a parent, it's okay to say that they're a parent, right? If your audience are parents and that's who you're trying to talk to, then, it's good to call that out and say, well, Margaret or Bob is a parent, okay? And we do this because we want to highlight the type of client that we work with and what category they're in, right? So I know some of our listeners might have multiple segments or markets they work with, like we do, right? For my business, so in your case study, you want to highlight that particular key segment, right? And then once you've done a profile of the customer, I usually put a logo here. I usually put, if they've got a team photo, something like that, right? I like to use visuals in this. Obviously, if you're using email marketing, you don't need to have all the visuals, but I'm all about the full storytelling if I can do it. And then we move into number 3. The third P, which is the problem statement. And here's what I asked you before. It's like, okay, you know who your avatar is, your prospective buyer. Now, what are their key pain points, right? And here we want to get clear on their challenges, right? And paint the picture of the before, right? And I kind of compare this to the personal trainer who's doing the before shot of the client when the client was, like me, 20 kilos overweight. And then 6 months later when we've lost, the weight and then we're looking slim and whatever the goal is. Or the other way, maybe I'm super skinny and I want to bulk up, right? It's the before shot, right? Here we're doing the before shot in step 3. What's the problem statement? What's going on in their world at that point in time when they came to you? What are the challenges, right? We have the primary challenge, but I also like to get into some other impacts of those challenges, right? If for example, I did one, which I'm going to show you in a moment, Jesse, and he was telling me this was the primary challenge that he was facing, and I said to him, well, what did that mean to you? What was the impact of those challenges, right? How did it affect your health? How did it affect your, and I'm digging a little deeper, but beneath the surface, right? Because usually there's a story beneath the story, and you want to try and get to that level. Okay, so this is really customer research is what it is, right? And then we go to step 4 is out. This is where you get to show your expertise. So we're really now talking about your process, okay? And you want to break down the steps that you took to reach the solution, okay? And this is where, I just interviewed someone this morning, and he's an SEO. He runs an SEO agency, and I basically said to him, okay, what steps did you take to help your client achieve X, right? And he broke it all down for me, and I said that's, and he was quite in depth with it, and he wasn't worried about that. He's like, I've had other people say to me, but I don't want to give away the secret sauce, right? What if someone goes and steals my process? I said, people can get processes all over the place, but can they execute as well as you can? That's the question. And if they can, then this is a whole other conversation we're going to have around business development. But I think what I would say to this part, if that's the question in your mind right now, what I would say is, can you give enough that it shows that you have a methodology, right? Or that it shows that, you have some kind of system, and then, you don't have to give everything away, okay? But the key here is, remember, I want to go back to the intent of the case study, right? This is a piece of content that you're going to put out that is really for someone who's in the evaluation stage, right? They're looking for, they know they've got a problem, they're looking for a solution. Okay, now they're evaluating multiple vendors, right, or multiple solutions, right? And so what's going to be different between your case study and the other 3 businesses that they're comparing you to, right, is going to be, well, how well do you articulate what you do? All right, and do you present it in a way that resonates with them and their values? Okay, and so this process step, this is where we do it. I've done, for example, for one of the case studies we've done for process step, we actually interviewed the business owner, and then put their responses as a video onto the case study. Right, and so you can actually see the expert talking about it, and talking through the steps. It's almost like you're watching the doctor diagnose the client in real time, right? And so that's step 4. Then we move on to step 5, which is a payoff, and this is directly tied to step 1, which is the headline, but we're going to elaborate on it. Right, so we're going to talk about the key benefit or outcome that was achieved, and then here's where we get a bit more into emotional benefits. Right, so I mentioned, I'm going to say her name's Margaret, but that's not really her name. I'm just going to say this is someone I worked with where I was asked to interview her for another client, and he had this 12-month coaching program, and he helps the business owner to systemize their their SOPs and processes and whatnot. And the real reason that they do that is because the business owner is looking to free themselves, get themselves out of the business so they can work on the business. That's the goal. So when I interviewed the client, I said to them, wow, you've been able to achieve this. You've just gone on a 2-month holiday. But what's been the real benefit of, this process for you? And the thing that really surprised me, but also surprised my client, was when she said, what it was I was able to get my Sundays back with my son, right? Because before this, I would spend 4 hours every Sunday doing admin work. Okay, and now because we've been able to systemize, I've now been able to bring in, hire a VA to take over that work. I step out of it. I'm spending time, with my kid, and then she had tears in her eyes when she was telling me that story because it meant so much to her. Okay, and that's what we really focused on when we presented the case study. All right, was that's the impact of the work. It's not just the work itself, yeah? So then we go into step 6 is the praise, and this is where we're asking the client to actually say in their words, right? And the question I normally ask is, if you were telling a mate at the pub or, wherever you were having a drink and you were just sharing, how this particular person or this business helped you, what would you say? All right, and they're literally just going, okay, I would say it in this way, and they give me an answer, right? And what I'm looking for is, coming back to the authentic that we started with here, is I'm looking for the authentic response. I'm not looking for the polished copywriters in there, done all the work to put in the buzzwords and all these sort of things. I'm looking for what does the client actually say and believe and feel, all right? And that's the, one or two sentences that we then add at the bottom of the case study. All right, so now we've gone through sharing the whole story from the first 6 Ps, and then last step, which I saw Melissa's question. Yes, Melissa, this is the call to action, right? So the proposed next step is, what's the next logical step? They've just read through the whole thing. They've seen your process. They've seen the outcomes that you've been able to achieve with that particular client that looks like they're like them, and then, okay, now they're going, how do I engage with you? What's the next thing, right? And so you might have your, whether it's a lead magnet, I don't even like the name of that thing, but the next logical step, which is, book a trial with our software or jump on a call or, go and grab this guide or whatever it is, yeah? So that's the entire process. Back over to you, Oliver. I know you might have some questions around individual pieces of this.
Oh, no, well, I guess my question and leading on from Melissa's was also just to talk a little bit about CTA or call to action. Sometimes that can be, difficult to determine, what should I be asking, these people to do? Is there, do you have a view on how to determine what the most successful call to action might be for a case study?
I think you're going to have to really, there's no one direct answer to that question. I think you're going to have to test, maybe test a few. I would typically, so for some of the clients I've been working with, they already have their case, their next conversion step. So they already know that, the best first step after reading the case study is actually to jump on a 15-minute call with us and have a consult, or fill for me, for my copywriting work, the next logical step is actually to submit a brief, right? So they would actually submit, they fill in a form, and it basically says, okay, here's what I want done, etc., etc. How much would it cost? And then I come back with, a quote, or I might propose a jump on a call if I need more detail, right? So now for my bookkeeping client that I'm going to share the example of in a moment, the next logical step is actually to download a guide, right? So they actually have a guide that they've developed. And I also have another client who they offer, their call to action is to jump on a free training webinar or free training series that they've developed. So you would opt in for that, and then you would learn in that training series. It breaks down. It actually, the nice way they've done it is that training, it makes sense because the way the case study is designed, it shows their methodology, and then it talks through the philosophies, and then the training webinar, actually the first video talks about, it's almost like it carries the conversation on to the next point naturally. So it doesn't feel like it's this, I'm pushing you into a funnel. Like what it is, it just feels like you've just read this thing. If you want to learn more about our philosophy and how we help our clients, here's a training series on how to do X, which is a problem that the case study actually talks about. In the case study, it talks about, we help this client solve problem X. Now, if you want to solve problem X too, here's some training we've got on how to do it, right?
Oh, well, look, what I might get you to do is, if you just maybe, you want to show us one example, we're actually in a fortunate position here in that Birgit, who is part of the audience and in the Zoom room, she's actually, again, another very long-standing and valued, rounded customer. She's run, I think, her own freelance content PR agency for many, many years. And actually, if you guys scroll up a little bit further in the chat, has given us a link to the case study pages on her website, and I'm actually going to invite Birgit onto the webinar and ask her a couple of questions. And I'm conscious, obviously, that we're coming up to 45 minutes. Time does fly. So maybe show us your example, and then I'm going to bring Birgit in to give maybe a different slant on, the real world experience of building case studies. Maybe she can talk about the benefits that she's got, and then I've got a couple of questions. So talk us through this case study.
Yeah. So we recently did a case study for Bean Ninjas, which is they're an online they're an accounting firm, and they help e-commerce businesses with growth, their financials. Let's just put it that way. They have bookkeeping service, they've got financial advisory and all kinds of services. But when I was approached to do this case study, basically I set up a time to interview Jessie, who runs I think it's a SaaS product helping e-commerce suppliers. And then, so if you pay attention to how this is broken down, this is the 7 steps in practice, right? So we start off with the headline, and you can see straight away, right? The headline is focused on a key metric, which is time, right? So with and being in that, this is for an accounting firm. Typically, what happens with accounting firms, and some people can probably resonate with this, is some businesses don't want to share their financials publicly, right? So this particular client didn't want to talk about, we generated $1 million in revenue and all these things. They didn't want to talk about as numbers, and that's fine, right? But what they were willing to talk about was, so then I had to look at, okay, well, what were the benefits beyond, you had a 3x in revenue or whatever, we saved you, thousands of dollars in expenses. We looked at, okay, what was the main problem that you had? And he basically said, well, prior to working with Bean Ninjas, he had outsourced to a firm in India and had them for a while. Then what he realized was around tax time, when the accountant was saying, okay, now we've got to submit, your stuff to the ATO. They basically said, your books are a mess, and you're going to have to go back through your books and look at all the transactions that for the last 12 months and clean it up. Right, and that's the last thing you want to hear when you've just hired a bookkeeping firm to actually take care of your books for you for the last 12 months. And so he was in this really, undesirable situation of having to actually go into his Xero and look at his books, for I think it's like a couple of hours a month or whatever it was, and he didn't want it. And I got to understand, as a business owner, he didn't want to do that. Like, he's like, I don't want you to. I didn't train as a bookkeeper or an accountant. I'm not. That was a challenge, and so, through the interview process, what came to was something that he said right at the end of the interview, which was, because I said, what's changed for you since you started this? And he just went, you know what? I get this email once a month. Right, in the email, there's a checklist of things I need to look at, and it literally takes me 5 minutes to go into the tool, and I'm done with my books for the month. Right, and now all that time I'm not in the books, I'm now spending, I'm focusing on sales, and growing the company, and that's what it was, right? So then that's the headline. We then went into us profiling. So let's go through the P's. So we had the headline, and then we've got the profile of the customer. We talk about Jessie as the entrepreneur, but we also talk about Bento, his company, and what they do, right? We go into the challenge. Okay, so you can literally see with the way I use the headings, I'm actually using, like, calling out these are the headings. The challenge. We go into, like a breakdown. He's talking about the outsourced team in India, etc., etc. We're also looking at, what else was going on for him, at that time. So we detailed that. We get into the solution. Okay, at this point, I go back to Bean Ninjas, so my client, and I go, can you give me a breakdown? Can we talk to one of your accountants who worked on the file and break down everything that they did? And they literally did that. So they gave me, these were the things that happened. And my role as the writer on this was to translate it and try to remove as much of the jargon as possible, because it's the challenge here is it can get very technical very quickly. But we went to, okay, here were the key phases, here were the things that were done, right? So you can see here's the expertise right there, like the reconciling accounts, setting up bank statements, all these things, right? And as someone reading this, I'm going, well, it's good for me to know this, but I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do this, right? So that's the solution. We get into the results, right? So here we get into the payoff, what I call the payoff in the framework. the books were the cleanest they've ever been. We've got statements. So embedded within this are quotes that are coming directly from the client. Okay, so this is important for the authenticity. Remember, it's about the client. It's not about us telling the story. It's more about, okay, this is what the client's saying of the experience, right? And so we kind of mix the two, and then we get down to the end. There's even a tweet that he did afterwards where he actually recommended the business on Twitter. And so I embedded that, or got our WordPress person to embed that into the article. And then the call to action is down the bottom, right? So, what's going to happen next? So that's all there. And that's the format. Now, I want to give you the follow-up from what happened with this. So once we completed this and published it on the site, Bean Ninjas actually went out and tweeted this, this article out onto their Twitter profile, and they tagged the client into that tweet, right? And guess what happened? Jess actually retweeted the tweet, and then someone that was following him responded immediately and said, actually, they read the case study, and they said within a few minutes, they said, actually, I need this too. I'm going to book a call with Bean Ninjas right now. And then a week later, they became a client, right? So
that's the perfect scenario, right?
Right. I mean, now let me say this doesn't happen all the time, but was a really good example of how when a story is shared in this way, it can literally lead to a lead generation sort of activity, but also a sale. Right. So anyway, I hope that's a good example for you.
Yeah, it's a great example. We might get another one now. And in the meantime, Anf, if I can ask you to stop screen sharing, and I am going to ask Birgit to join us. Can you hear us, Birgit? You're on mute at the moment.
Yes.
Yes. There you go. You don't have to put your camera on. I'm not sure if you can. But thanks for joining us. I know this has been ad hoc, and I've just shared the link to your case study page as well. And I will actually share my screen now, and so that people can see your case study page too. Talk to us about your case studies and why you chose, why you've chosen to do what you have.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, Oliver, and I've really enjoyed listening today already, because a lot of it's very similar, which is always nice to know that what you're putting out there lines up with what others are doing. And I suppose in my line of work, public relations, there's still a lot of mystique. What is this stuff that is public relations, and how does it actually work? And so you'll see as Oliver's scrolling through there that we've got a bit of the same stuff explaining what the challenge was and also our approach to it. And then you'll see that tiny little infographic there because I agree metrics are important. And so at the start of developing a campaign for somebody, we say how we're going to measure success, and we agree on those things. And so that's the data that shows what we achieved. And I've just always found that they are really well read by CEOs and others who think, well, we could do this, but we can't understand exactly how it can work for us. So I think to me that's the real benefit. And I really agree that the key question this stuff needs to answer is what's changed. Because if nothing powerful or emotional or motivational has changed by the work you've done, then it's sort of a bit pointless writing a case study.
Awesome. And I think, what I like is personally what I see is obviously you've structured it, you've used a structure. There's a little bit of design that's, that means it's consistent with your brand on your website, but really outside of the, getting the words down on paper or on the page and refining it, you're not doing anything sort of particularly technically amazing here. This is not, there's not a lot of graphics. There's not video. It's not anything that anybody else couldn't do.
Yeah, exactly. I think as we've heard today, it's really about the questions, and that's why I really like the examples from today's session, is because they show the quotes from people, and that's the power, I think.
If there's one thing I'd say though, Birgit, like looking at this page, it's right down at the bottom. If I go backwards a page, and here are your case studies,
yep.
And then they're buried underneath all of this other stuff that you've done. I would say bring this to the fore. Let people see them.
They do have their own section.
Yeah. Awesome.
I'll drop that menu. But yeah, always happy to have feedback. Thank you.
No worries. Well, look, thank you for joining us ad hoc, and I'll just put you back on mute, Birgit. Thank you again. Now, obviously, I'm very conscious of the fact now that we are coming up to time, but I have two questions to finish with that I think are pretty important. My first question is, how do you choose the right client to ask? Because obviously when you do a case study, there's going to be some involvement from that client. You're going to require their goodwill and some expectation of their time. How do you choose the client that's most likely to be receptive to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what I typically do with my clients when we go through this process, I actually say, okay, you've already told me who your avatar is or who you're trying to reach with the case study. Like in Burgess' example, she knows which organizations typically she works with and she can help. And so I would then say, can you think of, 2 or 3 clients that would potentially want to do that, be a story for you, and that have given you great feedback already, right? So whether, now if the answer is yes, that's great. We can then select and then we do the invitation process to the client. And in the invitation process, I basically give my client, I give them a couple of bullet points to share to highlight why we want to profile the client. So we basically say, we want, now, if you were role playing here, if you were the client, Oliver, I would say, Oliver, I'd love for you to be one of our, we're producing a series of customer stories, success customer wins, or whatever it may be. I'd love to have to profile your business. So that's key wording here is we want to profile your business. So it's a chance for them to get some PR or to get some focus on their business. And then we look at, okay, in the interest of time, how long is it going to take the client? So we actually express this will be a 20-minute interview or require you to complete 5 questions, 5-question survey or whatever it may be, the way you want to do it, that's fine. You want to express how long it's going to take, give them expectations, and then I always I'm a big sort of stickler for, we want permission from the client and we want their buy-in to doing the case study. So I always say we're also not going to publish anything without you having seen and approved of the draft. Right. So once the process is completed, we actually present a draft to the client and say, let us know. Do you want to fix anything? Have we miscommunicated something? Right? Have we left anything out? And then because they're part of the process and they're collaborating with you, they're more likely to move forward with it. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. And I think the other thing that's important there, I find, is always in that initial request, give them a way out. Like, allow them to make it easy for them to say no, and don't make them feel obliged to do it, I guess, as a small 100%. Point. So my final question is just on that note. So when is the best time to ask? When is the best time to ask your client for a case study?
Great. So now if you already have some kind of system for getting feedback from your clients, and then, so for example, I'm thinking of, so for Bean Ninjas, for example, they have an NPS process. So basically, that's a net promoter score. It's a customer feedback survey they send out on a quarterly basis, right? But they've also got embedded within their process, once a job is done, to send an email which basically says, thank you for working with us on this project. This was it was a great result. By the way, do you mind filling out taking 1 minute to fill out this survey? Right, so they click a link, they give a rating score from 0 to 10 or whatever it is, and then what they're looking for is, if the client responds with an 8, 9, or 10, right, then the immediate follow-up email that's sent after that is, loved your response. Thank you for the the 9-star rating. We'd love to feature you as one of our client success stories. Would you like to learn more about that? Right. So when a client is giving positive feedback, that's really the best time to ask them to do the case study.
So strike while the iron's hot, I think, is the lesson there.